Right. So you come from Scotland, don't
Yes,
you?
I do, yes. What gave it away? Was it the accent?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what work do you do, like, what's it all about?
The job that I've got in Scotland just now, big fancy job title. The job title is National Naloxone Programme Coordinator. Yeah. Now what that means is my job is about going out and meeting with lots and lots of different people that have different backgrounds. Some of them are doctors, some are nurses, some are pharmacists. And then I also work with lots of people who are in jobs working in drug services. So their job is about helping people who've got drug problems. So I meet with them and we plan training sessions and I train them on some of the things that we've spoken about different drugs and what the effects of those drugs might be on somebody's body. And we talk about overdosing on those drugs. And then we talk about naloxone. I do lots of work with the Scottish Government. So I spend a fair amount of time working with people who are in the government to try and make sure that all the different parts of Scotland are making this medication available for people with drug problems. That's my job, if you like, is to try and make sure there's as much naloxone out there as needs to be. And the reason that job is there is because Scotland has lots and lots and lots of men and women who die every year. And lots of them are mums and dads. But they die every year because they accidentally overdosed. And if naloxone had been there, they might have lived. So,
what do you think about the prices of naloxone?
Price is a tricky one. Naloxone's not that expensive as a medication, yeah. Naloxone is probably costing about £10–11. So it's not an awful lot of money. Especially when you consider what it can do, which is save a person's life. And I think you and me would both agree you can't really put a price on a person's life. Yeah. So for the sake of £10 or £15, which is all we're talking about here, you could potentially have someone still alive. So it's a cheap medication compared to lots of other ones. It's much, much cheaper compared to lots of other ones.
And what do you think makes you want to do your job?
That's one of those big questions. I've got a few reasons for wanting to do my job. I suppose the main reason, if I'm really honest with you, is I genuinely care about people. Yeah. Sometimes people who've had lots of problems in their lives and they've been using drugs a lot or alcohol or whatever, sometimes they can find it really difficult to move away from that drug use or that alcohol use. And sometimes it means that they're at lots of risk. Yeah, lots of risk and harm. And I suppose there's part of me that thinks the kind of society and the kind of country I want to be living in is one that recognises that, that people are entitled to be helped. Yeah. And it shouldn't matter if a person's got a drug problem. It shouldn't matter if because they've got a drug problem they've had to go out and they've had to go out and maybe steal or do X, Y, Z, all manner of horrible things that come from sometimes having a drug problem. They should still be entitled to the opportunity at life. So what I guess I'm saying is life to me is an incredibly precious, precious thing. And for the sake of a simple medication being made available, hundreds of people would live who otherwise wouldn't. So that's probably why I do the job that I do, and that I need wages. Got to buy food. So, what's your interest in naloxone? Why are you interested in it?
Probably because it's really simple and it can save the person's life, basically. So it's really good, and I like learning about things to do with drugs and medication.
Sure.
But yeah, and it's just simple. It
is pretty simple, isn't it? And yet lots of people make it sound a lot more difficult than it needs to be. And do you know, you'd asked there about the cost of naloxone. One of the big discussions that I get kind of dragged into quite a lot is whether or not it's worth spending money on naloxone. Seriously.
Yeah.
Honestly, lots and lots of people in big fancy jobs who are, they pay for the different services in the areas. Their job is to commission services, as it's called. They'll sometimes ask, is it going to save us money if we make naloxone available? And I sometimes find that a difficult question to answer. Not because let's calculate, if we spend so many £1,000 on naloxone and it costs this much for ambulances and getting people to hospital and not because of that, but actually more because that question's being asked. That's the bit that makes it difficult for me to answer it. People ask, is it worth spending that money on people who've got drug problems? But what they sometimes forget is these people, just as I said earlier, are sometimes mums or dads or aunts or uncles, their husbands, their wives, their sons, their daughters, their citizens, their people in our communities. So it's a good question to ask in relation to the cost, and probably that's the most challenging aspect of it just now, is people argue that is it worth spending money on?
So have you ever had to put anyone in a recovery position, not maybe because they aren't breathing, but they are breathing, they're just unconscious?
Yeah. Quite a few times, for a variety of different reasons. Because my job is to train other people. So that means that, I'm demonstrating how you put somebody in a recovery position. I do that almost every day. But in my own life, away from work, there's been a few occasions where I've had to put someone in a recovery position, and I know for a fact, on at least 2 separate occasions, by putting someone in a recovery position, it saved their life. Because that bit when, you'll know what I mean by this, when you do that thing, when you get up close to the casualty and you open their mouth a wee bit and you have a look inside, make sure there's nothing blocking the airway. Then you do that chin lift, the head tilt and the chin lift to open the airway. I remember one occasion where I'd done that to the person's head, and as I'd done that, they went, and they took a big deep breath. Now, that meant that because their head had been sitting down the way it was, they weren't moving enough air. Me simply doing this with their chin meant that they could move enough air. So once I'd done the rest of it, the say hi, support my face, bend my knee, roll me over, as we call it. Well, that's how we describe it in Scotland. Once I'd done that, called the ambulance, and I knew that person was safe. So there's been more than one occasion I've put somebody in a recovery position, but I know for a fact on a couple of occasions it saved somebody's life. Just that.
Was it simple to put them into the recovery position?
Really, really, really easy. In fact, so easy it's child's play. There you go. As you've already proven, you've demonstrated how easy it is. People sometimes think, it's really tricky and, it can be really difficult, but no matter how lots of people describe it in different ways, and you've maybe seen different videos with people describing it, but as long as you can get someone on their side and their mouth is pointing towards the ground, and you can get your ear down to their mouth and you can hear that they're breathing, or you can detect that they're moving air, then you've done a good job. It doesn't have to be fancy, it really doesn't. And sometimes keeping things nice and simple is the best way. So.
Yeah, and obviously when the person who is telling them says it's simple, they obviously think, oh, it's simple, I could do that.
Absolutely. Well, you can do it.
If you said that it was hard, it was tricky, they might, if they go to do it, they might think, oh no, it's really tricky, what if I do it wrong?
Yeah, well, that's the other part, isn't it? What if I do it wrong? It's a good statement that you're making there, because people get anxious about doing things wrong, even though they're trying to help. Yeah, and being frightened of doing something wrong should never prevent you from trying to help. And the other key thing that you've said there is, if you're unsure or uncertain, you're going to be phoning an ambulance. You're going to be phoning, and they can describe or talk things through. But yeah, it is about keeping it simple. And we have to let people know that it is really simple. It's great to hear you tell me that you've pretty much known about this since you were about 9, because they taught you in school. Okay, they probably weren't talking about dealing with someone in an overdose. But actually, the way that you manage someone that you find who's just lying on the ground there unconscious, and maybe having breathing problems, is no different to how you would deal with someone who had overdosed. You would still do the exact same things. Whether naloxone was there or not, you would still do the exact same things. So the first aid you've learned could help anybody who was unconscious and breathing. And then there's that other additional bit of training if the person's unconscious and not breathing, and that's where, again, we phoned an ambulance, but we're now starting to do chest compressions and breathing for them. So, but yeah, it's dead simple.